Good evening, folks. Good evening. I know it's the last session of the day, so we need more energy in this room. Welcome to Microsoft Ignite. Welcome to Orlando. It's great to have you guys over here. A lot of you in this audience represent over 500,000 plus tenants who use Teams actively. Teams is kind of changing the way a business is operated. It is one of the fastest growing apps in Microsoft's history. And as security leaders and compliance leaders in your company, you should be rightly concerned with the amount of data which is getting generated in Teams. When data is generated, you are concerned about the compliance promise, who's securing the content, who's accessing the content, and how is it that you ensure that the right set of people have access to this content. So the focus of today's conversation is really around the security and compliance value prop of Teams. So when you walk out of this room, and I apologize for the echo, can't do too much about it, but when you walk out of this room, we want you to remember two things. Microsoft is deeply investing in the security and compliance value. And the second thing is Teams is the first-party application in Microsoft, and all the investments which we make in security, compliance, and identity automatically accrue towards Teams. And that's going to be the focus of today's conversation. And a quick introduction. My name is Praveen Vijay-Raghavan. I own and drive the security and compliance capabilities of Teams. And with me?
I am Hugo Ferreira, and I'm a senior IT analyst at Vale. Vale is a mining company, and I've played the role of project manager. So I was responsible to implement Microsoft Teams there.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Christopher Bryan. I am a product marketing manager for Teams. I specifically focus on the areas of security, compliance, and manageability. And with that, let's start. So first, just to set the context, let's talk about transformation. As many of you probably hear this word a lot in your organizations. It's a hot topic, and rightfully so. Your competition is getting faster. You want to reduce the cycles, and being able to have high-quality teamwork in your organizations can unlock growth for you. In fact, over 86% of leaders in organizations cite that lack of collaboration or communication is a top reason for workplace failure. There's a plethora of applications out there for enhancing productivity in the workplace. What we're lacking is an application that can help teams of people come together and be more productive in everything they do. And that's why we built Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is the hub for teamwork that brings everything that a team needs in one place. It brings together your chats, threaded conversations, your meetings with video conferencing, your calls with PSTN calling, the power of collaboration with the power of Office 365 applications, and finally, the ability to create and integrate your workflows and applications into one frame. But what does that mean for you? What that means for you is you can transform that workplace collaboration. That means that you can provide a centralized space for people to come together, to chat, to meet, to create, to make decisions. It's a single place where your content is organized in teams or projects so you don't disrupt your flow of work. It's a place where you can actually, access your business critical information. You can access your applications. You need to be able to execute repeatable processes efficiently. And leveraging the power of Teams as a platform allows you to do that. You can bring your applications, you can bring your services into the frame. Also, if you have developed custom tools in your organization, Teams also supports you in that journey. You can also connect everyone in the organization onto a single platform. Whether we're talking about the C-suite, or we're talking about the manufacturing floor, a classroom, a hospital, everyone can leverage the powers of Teams. We have thought about the different roles, the unique needs of every single type of individual out there, and we continue this work, and we have developed customized solutions where we're talking about a sales associate, a nurse, a teacher, and we continue to bring more and more in that regard. Finally, the reason why we're all here, is because Microsoft Teams, as part of Microsoft 365, brings you all of the controls that you need and the enterprise-grade security and compliance. And for that, I'm going to pass it to Praveen to dive deeper into that world.
So in order to understand the security and compliance capabilities, it's important to unpack it into different verticals. We spread it across identity management, information protection, the ability for you to discover content and being able to react to it, apply governance policies, what kind of content should exist for how much time, and eventually the ability to manage risks. So we're going to dive deep into each one of these verticals, and a lot of the announcements which are made are things which have either recently happened or things which have been announced in the last 6-8 months. So let's start with identity and access management. So identity is the keys to the kingdom. If the bad actors compromise the identity, your content is lost. So much like the rest of the session, the great part about Teams is the fact that the investments which have happened in Azure AD automatically accrue towards Teams. So the first part about identity is just a strong authentication mechanism. You need to ensure that your users have strong passwords, have MFA enabled. So when you enable MFA for your organization, much like Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, you automatically accrue this towards Teams. So when a user tries to log into Teams, they will be either challenged with the 2FA workflow, or if you have PIN enabled, they would see the same workflow. The second aspect is what do authorized users get to access. This is based on the policy engine which is being built in Microsoft AAD called conditional access. And Teams is part of that overall picture as well. So based on the signals which could come from devices, from different applications, from users, we determine a risk score. And as admins, you can configure policies which determine who can access Teams. So in my test tenant, for example, it's a pretty easy workflow. If you log into the AD portal, you can create the conditional access. Teams shows up as a first-party workload in the conditional access workflow. And you can set up some if conditions or policies. So this error screen, for example, you see is which prevents users from accessing Teams from unmanaged devices. So if you want to control your environment where you want your employees to only access Teams from a managed device, you can create a conditional access policy which prevents authorized users. This is a key part. The first part is authorizing users, and this is really about the conditions which are applied to authorized users, which will determine whether they can access Teams or not. The second screenshot over here is one which prevents access of Teams beyond business hours. For example, if you're representing organizations in which you expect people to clock in, clock out, and you don't want them to access Teams, say, from a non-work location, you can set up a conditional access policy which enables them to, or which enables you to make sure that employees are accessing Teams only within the work environment. The other aspect of security is in enabling collaboration. Teams offers two kinds of collaboration methods. One is called guest users. So this is a quote from BP. We did a case study on it. I've just taken a snip of what they commented with respect to usage of the guest users feature. So again, it goes back to the fundamental tenets. AAD has built a great story around guest users. We just inherit those capabilities. We make sure that Teams participates in that entire workflow. So you can add individuals as guests in your own tenant, you can manage them, and you can make sure that they are part of certain conversations. As security administrators and admins, we also give you the capability to disable or enable this functionality. You can log into the Teams admin portal, just simply disable this functionality in case you're not interested in it. The second aspect is around federation. This enables other users, say from Contosource and Fabricams, if they want to interact with you, they have the capability to discover you and then have these conversations over Teams. So we offer both these methods. The end goal is being able to enable collaboration so that you can interact with entities both within your company as well as entities outside your company. The next aspect after securing your identity is securing the information which is being created. So identity is your front door. If folks cannot get past the front door, then you talk about dealing with how to control the flow of information. The way we achieve this is through the Office 365 DLP stack or data loss prevention stack. This enables you to create policies to determine what is considered as sensitive or non-sensitive. There is a set of pre-configured 80+ rules, and those number of rules just keep expanding. It depends on the industry vertical. It depends on your business. You can create these policies. Once you create these policies, from a team standpoint, that content is being monitored, and whenever those policy matches are being met, end users will be warned about whatever you want them to do. For example, you can prevent the content from being shared, or you can give users the ability to override this content. Again, the key part is you can create these DLP policies across different kinds of Office 365 workloads and enable it either for Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, or Teams. The beauty of this approach is there is a one policy management. You don't need to have different consoles. You don't need to have different policies, but effectively apply them to all Office 365 workloads. So over here in this screenshot, we have two users who are trying to exchange content. So when the sender tries to send some content, and assume that this organization has set up some DLP policies which prevent this kind of sensitive information from being shared, the sender is being told that, hey, you're not allowed to send this content. The sender is also given an option to override, provided the admin has enabled it in such a way, and the sender is also informed on why this content was blocked. From a recipient standpoint, they just see this message. They see an indicator saying that the message has been blocked. But I do want to highlight one aspect. I don't want to oversell this capability. This is not an active DLP solution. This, we call it as a passive DLP solution. When I send someone in this room some content, they will see it for a few seconds before that content is nuked from their view. And with that, to Hugo.
Yeah, just talking a little bit more about my company. So as I said, I'm working at in a mining company, right? And it's a global one. It's the first one to produce iron ore and also nickel. So we are in the middle of the journey to implement our digital transformation. So in automation, we have some trucks that are already autonomous. So we are in the middle of this journey. And we also have the presence in many countries, as you can see. So more than 120,000 employees, counting contractors and also contractors. And we have already turned our teams to teams-only operations. So it was done in August. And since then, we have more than 47,000 users, active users. And these numbers were exported in a report in September, so 2 months ago. Lots of messages, lots of chats and calls in between employees. So great journey so far. But for us, information security and compliance and trust are crucial and fundamental. So we took this opportunity to implement DLP, and we've started doing it in a specific policy to avoid sharing personal information in Canada. That is one of the countries that we operate. So we are using it a lot. We are testing it just to avoid leaking information outside my company and also internally. So and also we are ready to implement the Brazilian version of GDPR. So we are testing this first policy to be ready to implement this Brazilian version of GDPR soon. And we have some feedbacks of the product, so it's not working very well yet, but for sure Microsoft is working to have it done soon. So we still have the lack to send messages when we don't have sender and receiver using Teams only. So we are using it already, but we have lots of companies that are not using it yet. And when we send a message, the other feedback that we have is that when we send a message to other person and we take some time to receive the feedback that we have the policy implemented. So sometimes it's hard to get so many time, so it would be good to have less time to receive this kind of message.
So once you've secured the identity and we've talked about securing the information, the next aspect in security and compliance is in empowering our administrators and compliance officers to actually discover the content. Now, with teams, we see that this has led to an exponential growth of data. Now, with any modern organization, the next challenge is, hey, there's so much data. Who's creating it? What kind of content is being created? And a lot of enterprises are spending significant resources in either adopting or building e-discovery solutions. So from a Microsoft standpoint, we have the complete e-discovery suite of products, which enables you to discover the content. You can also put specific employees or specific users in your organization under hold. You can ensure that they cannot tamper with the content which is being created in Teams. And eventually, for example, if you are under litigation or you need to share this information to an external counsel, you have these workflows which will help you export the content and hand it out to them. So much like the other capabilities which we have talked about and we will continue to talk about, the advanced e-discovery workflow or the e-discovery workflow, which is available in Office 365, Teams figures as a primary workload which you can pick and choose. You can search for content which is being created in Teams. You can search for content which is being exchanged as part of chat, could be one-on-one chats, group chats. But all of that content is discoverable to you as IT administrators and compliance officers. Once you select the user who you want to place under hold, we also have semantics by which we can discover the teams which they are part of, the SharePoint sites which they are part of, and then put those appropriate resources under hold. One of the set of feedbacks which we've been hearing for the last few months has been, and since the time the feature was available, was with the lack of threading of these conversations or the fact that you don't have context to these conversations. Typically, when the content is discovered, in the beginning, we used to just show it as individual messages, and we didn't do a good job in actually threading it together. So recently, we announced this capability, which enables you to see a threaded view of the Teams messages. So this is what you would see in the Teams client. You see content, you see the GIF images, and this is what you see in the e-discovery experience. The compliance officer gets the entire context. You have the conversation, as well as the images, as well as the GIFs and emoticons, whatever is being exchanged. But it's also worth calling out that for us, this is an evolving journey. There are certain features. We continue to ship features in Teams. There's a lag between what is available in Teams and what is it that the compliance officers can discover. But we are trying to bridge that gap as fast as possible. So with this view, you would be able to view the content. You would be able to get a complete context of the conversation so that you can then export it and give it off to, say, an external counsel or to the entity who's asking for this information. A new capability which we also developed is called redaction. So with this capability, you would be able to redact the content which may not be applicable for the counsel. So if there is a request to get information about, say, Project Alpha, but then you have other things about Project Beta which comes up in the conversation, and you believe that you don't need to share this information with an external counsel, you now have this workflow where as part of the e-discovery experience, you can select the content which needs to be redacted, and you can export this content. So now you're only giving the content which needs to be shared, and you will prevent yourself from oversharing information which could play into the hands of your external counsel. This is not just applicable for Teams content. The e-discovery team has similar workflows for other workloads in Office 365. But the key message is, again, the same, which is whatever we build for the Office workloads, we make sure that we invest the same into Teams so that it shows up in our first-party experience.
Other feature that we are using a lot there is related to e-discovery and advanced e-discovery. So our areas, audit area and also ombudsman area, they are responsible to investigate any case for that requires legal reasons. So they can see messages exchanged in between employees. They can find everything by subject, by employee, by topic, by data. So it's pretty awesome. And sometimes we receive demand outside Valley and also inside Valley to search this kind of message and information to send to them. So it helped a lot, helped us a lot.
Good. Awesome. So moving on to data governance. So Microsoft Teams, as part of Microsoft 365, offers you capabilities that help you meet over 42 national, regional, and industry-specific regulations. It helps you reduce your risk if you find yourself in situations such as litigation, and it helps your organization share knowledge. In this specific area, we want to highlight retention policies. If you're new to retention policies, essentially they allow you to preserve your data for a specific period of time, or they allow you to delete data after a specific period of time. We're really happy that in Ignite, early this week, we announced that Team now supports retention policies as low as 1 day, and you will be seeing this into your tenants in the upcoming weeks. This is great news because Teams is actually the first workload in Office 365 that is enforcing this specific capability with this low retention. If you're new to retention policies, this is what you experience in the admin portal. As I mentioned before, there's 2 different types of policies. You can create preservation policies, essentially saying you want to retain the data for a specific amount of times. Even if the user deletes the data, you still have access to it. And of course, we have deletion data. So if you want data to be deleted after a specific period of time, you're able to do this. One other thing to highlight here is you actually have the ability to define what these policies are based off. You can create these policies based on when the information was created, or you can actually base these policies on when the information was last modified. Give you the flexibility to create these policies to meet your specific organization's requirements.
So the next aspect in managing your security and compliance is around managing the internal risk which your employees might be susceptible to. We looked at DLP, which will prevent the flow of sensitive information, but then organizations are also subject to a lot of different risks. It could be around IP theft, spillage scenarios, where content gets leaked, as well as insider trading and conflicts of interest. So these are, again, massive set of investments which are happening across Microsoft in the Office 365 stack. But Teams, again, is catching up to a lot of these investments. Some of these are already in market, which we'll be talking about in the next few slides. We are also making some investments in some of these areas which are called out in this slide. So let's start with information barriers. So this was announced sometime a few months back, which enables you to create what are ethical walls within your organization. So if you have groups of users who are not supposed to interact with other sets of groups of users, you can create these segments and prevent these segments from talking to each other. This is typically used in regulated industries, companies, as well as a lot of fintech companies. And also, we find a lot of interest from schools, from the educational field. They're also interested in making sure that, say, the high school students don't talk to the middle school students. And they want to create these segments of users and not have any interaction between them. So let's just walk through information barriers. So this is a typical enterprise. You have 2 groups of users. One is, say, the investment bankers and the financial advisors. And then you have a common group, which is the HR. So you don't want the investment bankers to talk to the financial advisors because they'll end up influencing each other. So we create an information barrier segment which makes sure that you put investment bankers in one segment and the financial advisors in another segment. And the IB policy or information barrier policy prevents communication between these 2. However, the folks in HR can talk to both these segments. So we want to make sure that there are certain sets of users within the company who can interact with both. This is a screenshot of what we are rolling out. It should be available pretty soon. As of today, the policy is driven through a PowerShell experience, but very soon you will have this experience in the SEC UX. This will enable you to create segments. You can back these segments by dynamic sets of users, and I'll explain why dynamic users is a better way to go. And also indicate who can talk to which sets of users or which segments can interact with which segments. It's also worth calling out that any user can only be part of one segment and not multiple segments, because then it just gets complex. So when a user tries to talk, this is like a one-on-one chat. If Chris and I are part of different segments, I won't be able to even discover Chris as part of trying to initiate a Teams conversation. We just block that from happening. So For all practical purposes, I don't even know who Chris is because I can't discover Chris. The same happens for group chats. So in this example, say the HR person starts a conversation with a user from the banker segment. That works fine. The HR person then adds the person from a financial advisor segment. We allow the user to be added, but as soon as the conversation is started, given that there is an IB policy which prevents users from one segment to talk to another, the person who was added last is booted out from the conversation. So we make sure that whether it's group chats, whether it's part of one-on-one chats, the information barrier policy is appropriately managed. But it doesn't just stop with messages. So let's look at what it takes with respect to joining meetings. For example, the two users from two different conflicting segments, say, are part of the same meeting invite. When one of the user joins, he or she is allowed to join because we don't detect any other conflicts. But when the second user from the conflicting segment tries to join the call, he or she would see an error message saying the company policy prevents them from joining the meeting. So we enforce the IB policy. We really create these two islands of users in two segments. We make sure that the communication between them is completely blocked. So much so that even when users move between departments, we make sure that we go boot these users who are now in conflicting segments. The best part about this is when users move between departments, we don't expect admins to go back to the IB policy wizard and kind of reconfigure. And this is the reason why creating dynamic users as part of the segments would help. When a user moves from one department to another, the dynamic AAD group is updated, and because of that, the segments are automatically updated. But we just don't stop with updating the segments. We also make sure that we clear out any previous group chats in which there could be a conflict. So the user who's booted out can still access the previous content because they were part of it. It would be in a read-only mode, but they wouldn't be able to get any new conversations which happen, and neither would they be able to edit any of the previously sent content. What we announced as in Ignite is also the integration of the IB policies in the SharePoint Online workflows. So when we announced IB first, we didn't have full capabilities with SPO. But now any of these SPO sites which are being created as part of creating the teams also inherits these IB policies. So the same example, if I send a link to Chris, which is a document which I say, hey, Chris, go read it, and say I send it over email or something like that, or I just send it from an outside mechanism, not using Teams. When Chris tries to open the link, he would be disallowed from accessing the link, saying that, hey, you don't have access to this because the organization has a policy which prevents two segments of users from interacting with each other. So at a 10,000 feet level, these are the different places where we check for the IB policies. We check when members are being added to teams, when a new group chat, new one-on-one chat is being initiated. We again check and enforce the IB policies. When members are invited to a meeting, when you do any kind of screen sharing, or even when you try to do a voice over IP call. In all these scenarios, we just block it. And now with the recent addition of SPO, access to SPO sites, as well as any of the sharing workflows are blocked for conflicting sets of users in different segments.
So we've implemented it at Valley. So there is an area there called mergers and acquisitions. So when they are handle confidential project, they cannot talk to financial area. So there is a guideline for them to avoid having this kind of conversation. And it was implemented recently. And the good thing of it is that we can avoid having guest users accessing information there that are critical and confidential. So, and also, when people move around areas, it happens a lot. I believe it happens also in your organization. So we can make sure that they are not accessing information that they shouldn't be accessing. As always, we have some feedback as well. So the first one was recently announced, and it was a gap for us, because by using it in SharePoint, in OneDrive, the users were able to access the information until now. But it was announced that it was solved already. And the other lack of feature that we found was that admin doesn't have reports to see who wants to violate this kind of barriers. So it was a lack of feature, and I believe Microsoft is working on that as well.
So the next aspect about flowing or controlling the flow of information is around concept of supervision. So supervision is a feature in Office 365 which has primarily been built to enforce corporate policies. If your organization, you have certain standards, you want employees to agree or follow those standards, you have workflows in which you can enforce these policies. The supervision workflow can also be used to manage any kind of legal or corporate risks. You have workflows in which you can look for predefined terms. You can use our ML engine to make sure that that content is being flagged. And finally, a lot of organizations just have a regulatory compliance to make sure that the content which is being exchanged, be it on email or be it in IM, they are able to audit and report out these violations. So the Office 365 or M365 supervision capability shows the Teams workload as a first-class citizen in this entire experience. Much like Teams, Skype for Business, there was an announcement which happened a few months back. But prior to that, Exchange Teams and Skype for Business are supported in the supervision workflow. Once these policies are created, the end users would see something, or the compliance officers would see something like this. This is, again, a threaded view. The parts which we have blanketed out are things where there's some kind of an abusive text message which is being sent, or some kind of an IM message where one person is either threatening or making some comment which is considered inappropriate. Again, this is one of those things where we found active interest from the educational sector, but guess what? Kids don't talk to each other really well. So our schools have reached out to us. They've said that, hey, we want to have these policies so that we can keep kids in check, either through teachers or school administrators who have full view of what is the kind of conversations which are happening. So the main experience is the fact that whatever we build, again, for Exchange, SharePoint, we make sure that these capabilities are available to you guys who are trying to drive teams in your organization. Because at the end of the day, we want Microsoft Security and Compliance to be that one single stop shop for you to build these capabilities. The next aspect is around auditing of events. So as much as all this information is flowing, you need the ability to figure out what is happening in the organization. It could be simple things like who's creating teams, who's adding users to the team, who is deleting teams. So all of this activity is, we call it just a paper trail. You just need this paper trail of things which are happening in the organization. We are, again, integrated fully into the Office 365 audit pipeline. So we don't have yet another place where you need to go view this content, but you can choose teams. So if you see the drop-down over there, it has some 25 items which are selected. It could very well be Exchange Online. It could be SharePoint Online. But you can pick teams. You can look at certain activities which are being audited and get a full view of what is happening. We continue to make improvements and investments in this. Much like the other features, we ship features. There are a lot of things which are a catch-up for us. But you should be seeing the ability to adding members, removing members is already available. We are also actively working on capabilities which will give you an auditable trail of who's been editing messages. What was the original message? What is the new message looking like? Now, one part about the auditing is just giving you a paper trail, but then what do we do with these audited messages? So we've taken these audited messages and fed into the cloud broker solution from Microsoft called MCAS. So MCAS helps you create these policies which will help you determine how the information is flowing either within or outside your organization. This is part of the EMS suite of products. It has capabilities where it's been already integrated into different workloads. If you look at the left side, you have Exchange Online, SharePoint, Skype, and now you have Teams as well. So the basis for the MCAS logic is built of the auditing logs. So we make sure that our auditing logs are rich. And from an MCAS admin capability standpoint, they can go create these policies. So I have created 4 in these test tenants. One is around warning the admins in case an external user is being added to the team. So this will fire off an alert. Rather than you having to go through and search the audit logs in Office 365, by creating these simple rules and policies, you can be appropriately notified. In case you have a disgruntled employee, as part of leaving the company, he or she decides to, say, delete content. It could be mass deleting tens of teams. So what you can do is to make sure that the alerts are fired, and you can also take some appropriate action. And we'll look at what those actions look like. And it could be delete of teams, delete of channels. So we have all these capabilities. So as and when our audit logging and our audit infrastructure gets richer, administrators and the MCAS product overall can go build more of these policies. So this is an example of what an admin would see in case a user is adding external users to a team. There's a clear indication of who's been added, who added which user. So then they can take a corrective action. Then they can reach out to the user, or they can take steps where they can boot out this user. When a user is attempting to, say, mass delete files, using MCAS, you can configure a policy which locks out the user. So you could set an alert saying that in 24 hours, maybe they try to delete more than 10 teams. So just lock out the user. So then they can't even log in. And then you can have workflows where you can notify the manager. And again, all of this is built from the audit log framework. And as we keep making the audit logs richer and richer, the MCAS workflows just keep getting better. The next aspect is around the Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection, or ATP for short. So ATP takes into account a number of millions of signals, actually, on a daily basis to actively detect threats in your organization. This is a heavily used feature across our enterprise customers, and it is extensively used so far for Exchange Online and SharePoint Online. Very soon, in the next few months, as we are rolling out this capability, this will now be available for the content which is being exchanged in Teams as well. There are two capabilities which we'll be talking about. One is called ATP Safe Links. This will make sure that any link which is suspicious is rooted out quickly so that your users in the organization are not fooled into taking to some kind of a website which they shouldn't be visiting. So creating the safe link policy is pretty much the same. What you see is an early screenshot. The radio button over there talks about how this policy can be enforced on Teams. If you try to do it today, you won't find that. But very soon, in the next few months, as we finish the rollout, you will start seeing Teams over there. Now, from an end client experience, if they say a user is posted with a link to some kind of a website, so when they click on it, the ATP engine kicks in. It does URL validation, make sure that it is indeed the right URL, or whether it trips any rules which have been configured. And these are not admin rules which we need to configure. These are things where we are learning. We are looking at URLs across the subsystem, be it emails, be it SharePoint Online. We know when the URLs turn bad, and based on those analysis, we know when a URL goes bad. And once we know that, we prevent the users from getting into those websites, and we flag those error messages appropriately. The next aspect is around what we call as safe attachments. So if you have files which are either malicious, or if your users end up uploading any kind of content, you now will have the mechanism where these files are actively flagged in the File Explorer view. So this is a screenshot, again, an early screenshot. We're still working to fully fit and finish this and ship it to all our customers. But essentially, the red icon over there is a warning sign that this particular file is malicious and that you should be deleting it. So this is a warning. And this is, again, based on the ATP engine which is running in your organization. So the key part is the investments which we make in Exchange Online, or the investments which we make in Azure AD, we continuously keep making improvements in the Teams platform and product so that it accrues to the value. Along with it, we also understand that Teams is beyond just messages and files. So that's our next set of challenges. We continuously are making improvements to bring all these capabilities into the kind of content which is being generated in Teams. It could be the voices, the recording, all that content. We also want to build security, IP, and compliance on top of it. Similarly, Teams is also becoming a hub for us for our third-party app ecosystem. If anyone was attending Zaki's session, which was right before this, it was about Teams as a platform. So we want to make sure that we give the same kind of capabilities to organizations so that as part of onboarding 3P apps or your third-party apps, you have the same security and compliance promises. So our investments don't stop. We are always trying to get better at it from a product perspective as well as from a Microsoft standpoint, where we want to invest in our security and compliance value prop. And our commitment is to make sure that whatever we ship in Microsoft automatically accrues towards Teams. So with that, we have 5 minutes for any questions. Sure.
So with the safe attachments, though, doesn't that also work with SharePoint and OneDrive, though, right? Like
Yes, it does.
So wouldn't it by default? So what's the behavior?
It needed work from our side. The way it is shown in the File Explorer view for Teams is different compared to the SharePoint Online experience. But fundamentally, the technology hasn't changed. What is working for SharePoint Online will also now work for the Teams content.
Now, meeting recordings.
Yes.
Okay. When am I going to be able to like archive, retain those things? Because our legal department won't let me turn on meeting recordings until I can grab the file from Stream.
So we don't have a public-facing roadmap commitment, but all I can say is that we are working on it. It's not a net new problem. There are a lot of customers who are blocked with this capability for meeting recordings, both from legal hold perspective, retention, definitely working on it.
It's coming. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, a quick question on DLP with external collaboration. So we have a number of Teams users who work with partners, with customers, and they're invited to their tenants. How could we apply DLP to those messages when our users are guests in somebody else's tenant?
Where the other tenant users are guests in your tenant, or
No,
this are
our
pure fed?
users are guests in the partner's tenant, for example.
So we don't let the policies of one tenant impact the other. The same reason where you wouldn't want, say, the participating tenants policy impact your users. We don't have mechanisms where we can block the content which your users are contributing in the other tenant. We are trying to build controls which will prevent you or which will empower you to make sure that your users don't become guests in other tenants. But once they are guests of another tenant, that tenant's policy kicks in. It's not the...
Because yesterday, or I think it was yesterday, we saw how like cloud app security can block messages in Facebook Workplace, I think it was.
Correct.
So like we're worried about our users actually posting proprietary information to some external source.
Correct. So the MCAS solution works sort of, I think they call it reverse proxy or something like that. So the content actually flows through the MCAS engine, and that's why they're able to inspect the content. The Teams content doesn't flow through the MCAS instance, which is there in your organization.
Oh, it's
so
not there yet today.
at this point in time, no. So your only controls are really the one which we definitely want to build, and this is coming from our FinSec customers, is preventing tenants from, or allowing tenants to make sure that their users don't become guests in other tenants. But once that wall is breached, you are at the other tenant's policy's mercy. The same way as other users, say guest users in your tenant, you want your policies to be enforced on them.
Thanks.
Okay.
Plans to have retention labels implemented in Teams.
We don't have a roadmap commitment on that. We know it's a problem, but we don't have people working on it just yet.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just being transparent. The previous gentleman, I said, look, there is a roadmap commitment, there's work happening. This one is not one of those.
Yeah, sorry. I think we have some questions here too. If
Sure.
you want to go back and
Maybe you guys can come over anywhere, time's up. So if you could just come here, we can split the questions.